private central banking is a recipe for disaster. And we've had 3 of these now, and Andrew Jackson shut down the second one of these things, and he was the only president to pay off the national debt in the process. And, of course, immediately there was an assassination attempt on his life. We've had 2 other presidents who tried to break the power of the Federal Reserve. We had Abraham Lincoln, who issued his greenbacks to fund the Civil War. And almost immediately, as soon as he was assassinated, the greenbacks were pulled from circulation. We had President John F. Kennedy, who issued Executive Order 11110, that ordered the creation of $4.5 billion worth of United States notes backed by silver. And he put those into circulation, which allowed Americans to conduct commerce without giving a percentage or a piece of the action to the Federal Reserve. 5 months later, Kennedy was killed in Dealey Plaza, and on the Warren Commission sat John J. McCloy, president of the Chase Manhattan Bank, president of the World Bank, and I don't care how good of a banker he is, there's no reason for him to be on the Warren Commission investigating the assassination of Kennedy unless it's there to make sure the economic dimension, the economic motive for the assassination remained hidden from the American people.
Yeah, that's interesting. How interesting that a banker was on the Warren Commission to sell the American public the fallacy, the fable of a quote-unquote magic bullet. Hey, getting back to Iran just real quickly, just so everybody knows, let's level set. Iran has let the IAEA inspectors in, whereas their enemy there, Israel, has not, correct?
That's absolutely correct. Iran has signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and so has the United States of America. Everything Iran is doing is allowed under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. They're allowed to have nuclear power plants. They're allowed to have medical isotopes. They're allowed to have industrial applications of nuclear materials. Iran is currently embarking on a program to develop nuclear-powered propulsion for tankers and cargo ships, which I think is long overdue. And they're following the rules. Israel, of course, has nuclear weapons. They've never signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty. They do not allow IAEA inspections. They were caught trying to sell a clandestine nuclear weapon to South Africa, which is the very activity the Non-Proliferation Treaty is supposed to prevent. And yet the U.S. keeps turning a blind eye, keeps sending tax money to Israel in violation of the Symington Amendment to the Foreign Appropriations Act and the Glenn Act. And it's just very, very clear that Israel and the United States are on the wrong side of history on this whole debate.
And, Michael, what did you think about Netanyahu's performance in front of the United Nations with his Wile E. Coyote cartoon bomb?
Well, it literally did, and it was kind of a Hail Mary pass where it's very clear that Israel has been crying wolf or nuclear duck about Iran for going on 30 years. We've been hearing from Israel. They're just months away from the nuclear bomb. And, it's obvious Israel wants the U.S. to make war on all of Israel's enemies. That's kind of an overlapping agenda with the petrodollar. But at this point, everybody remembers that whopper we were all told about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction, and much of that false information came from Israel as well. The United States has been at war on Israel's enemies and on the oil nations for longer than we were in World War II, and we're tired of war. We're tired of the costs. We're tired of seeing our kids come back in these cheap metal boxes, and we're well aware that the reason these kids are being killed and crippled has got nothing to do with the security of the United States of America. It's all about propping up Wall Street and the private central bank, the Federal Reserve. And people need to understand that before the creation of the Federal Reserve, there was no such thing as a world war. Now we're on the verge of big mistake number 3. And the United States and the banks have this horrible history. Every time they paint themselves into a financial corner, they get into a world war to try and get out of it. We had the crash of 1907, get out of that with World War I, crash of 1929, get out of that with World War II, crash of 2008. The U.S. has already invaded 10 countries on 2 continents. Technically, it's already a world war. They're just waiting for a really big bang and for the nukes to start flying.
Well, I need your opinion on one thing. So I'm no fan of Barack Obama, that is for sure. And I'm really not much of a fan of Romney since I was a Ron Paul supporter. I know you were a big Ron Paul supporter, too. What is your opinion about Obama possibly getting back in office versus Romney? Because it's my conclusion that if Romney gets in, he'll greenlight a war with Iran, whereas somehow Obama has been able to push back enough to keep that from happening. What's your take?
Well, if the war was only on behalf of Israel, I would say that Obama is likely to basically stall in the situation. but that larger agenda of reconquering all the world's oil producers to force them back on the dollar, that's still going to be there. So I think Obama is probably going to go along with that agenda in his second term. The only reason to maybe look more positively on an Obama second term comes down to the degree to which he's going to sell out. Now, we saw on Mitt Romney's speech this morning, his policy speech, he's all for increased military spending. He wants to go into Syria, definitely wants to greenlight Iran. The only difference between the two that I can see is in his second term, Obama is not going to be able to run for re-election. So he's not going to be as beholden to his supporters. He's going to be thinking about his historical legacy, and he's probably going to be a little bit less enthusiastic about going along with some of these agendas. He will go along, but not to the same degree, and on some of the fringe agendas he may pull back. Mitt Romney in his first term and desperate for a second term is going to do what he is told by Wall Street and Israel, and you know, he doesn't show any spine in terms of standing up to these various agendas. He absolutely, truly believed that comment about the 47%. He really doesn't care about the American people. His business ethics during his entire time at Bain Capital show that. He has absolutely no sensitivity to ordinary working people. It's all about pleasing money and serving money and making more of it. And so I don't like either Obama or Romney. I wanted Ron Paul, but I think marginally the U.S. is going to do a little better with Obama in the second term, mostly because he's going to be worried about his historical legacy.
Okay, guys. Well, you heard it here first. I guess I don't know where that leaves us, who to root for. I guess all we can do is root for liberty. For a long time, you've been saying the way to...
I'm rooting for an asteroid to come down and hit both those guys, and then we can get Ron Paul in. But
okay, me too. But I know for a long time you've been not rooting is the wrong word, for a long time you've been saying that, you know, once the system inevitably collapses, we'll roll out the new system. And you've been working on, I think, a book or at least an outline of what that new government should look like. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that, but also tell us about this, the Fed 100-year charter. I mean, it's up in 2013. What are we going to do? What can we do?
Well, the charter, the original charter for the Federal Reserve was for 100 years, and a lot of people are saying, huzzah, huzzah, it'll be over. But my understanding is that Congress very quietly passed an amendment to the charter, I think in the mid-1930s, that basically made it open-ended. So there is no automatic expiration. If Congress wanted to do something about it, the original charter allows the Congress to shut down the Federal Reserve by simply repaying the $1 billion that was loaned to the U.S. government on the creation of the Federal Reserve. And obviously that's not a very great deal of money in this day or age. As far as my commentary, yeah, I really do see the U.S. government and economy heading for a huge crash. If we can hold off the war that they hope will distract us all from it, then, yeah, Greece is going to be out of money next month. That means the credit default swaps Wall Street sold on Europe's debt are going to come due. They don't have the cash reserves to pay them off. The American people don't have the money to be looted to pay it all off. Obama might just simply say, I'm going to do the same thing Nixon did and say the agreements are no longer binding, but the political costs of that would be devastating. Everybody would drop the dollar. The rest of the credit default swaps would be dropped on the open market for pennies on the dollar, and that would bring the whole economic system crashing down at the same time. Now, I've been talking on my show about a blueprint for the new America, and basically it's an outline. Currently, it's being written in the form of a modification of the U.S. Constitution with commentary to say what worked for the American people, what didn't work for the American people. Let's look at what happened in Russia when the Soviet Union collapsed. Let's look at what they did that was right, like kicking out the oligarchs. Let's learn from our past mistakes, and let's start setting up our new government outline now, because if we wait until the actual crash, there's going to be no end of carpetbaggers coming in saying, I got a new government for you, just sign your name right here, and we'll be off and running with more of the same thing all over again. We know the United Nations is drooling at the possibility of establishing a one-world government should the United States collapse. And so I think prudence demands that we decide for ourselves, we the American people choose what kind of government we will have in this nation when the current government is finished with its death throes.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, we saw Iceland make the right choice, didn't we?
Yes, we did. Even the IMF is saying what Iceland did was the right thing. Iceland threw their crooked bankers in prison. They fired the government that helped them loot the people. They wrote off all of the mortgage debt that was arrived at through fraud, and Iceland's economy is improving. Hungary is now following the same model. Iran is starting to hang their crooked bankers. And we need to recognize that's the problem. I know a lot of people out on the Internet, they say, oh, the conspiracy to rule the world, it's the Bilderberg, or it's the Trilateral, or it's the Illuminati. No, it isn't. If you want to see what has ruined the greatest nation on earth, just walk down Main Street of any town in the United States and you look at that bank building. That's the problem. Private central bank and debt-based currency is a disaster. That's why the Founding Fathers said we cannot do that in this country, and that's why they came up with this revolutionary idea of government creating its own money, and almost immediately the banking families of Europe tried to bring it down. They succeeded with the first and second banks of the United States. Then they succeeded a third time with the Federal Reserve.
Well, Michael, again, I just can't thank you enough for your time. I know how busy you are. You're on the radio for 3 hours a day. You're one of the hardest working men in truth out there. And so, again, on behalf of all of us, thank you for your time. I don't know if you know this, but I listen to you via MP3 download when I work out and during drive time, so I can get just about your whole show in every day. Can you tell people how they can listen to you live?
Yes. My show is on the Republic Broadcasting Network, and it runs from 12 noon to 3 p.m. Central Time, Monday through Friday. There are podcasts available both at Republic Broadcasting and at my own website, whatreallyhappened.com. We're supposed to be on iTunes, but lately iTunes has not been carrying our podcasts. We're working with them right now to get that restored.
Okay, Michael. Well, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it, and hopefully we can be in touch again in a couple months.
We'd love to do it.
Okay, Michael. Thank you again.
Thanks so much for watching and spreading this information with friends and family. Together we can take liberty back. And check out my new website, thelibertymill.com. Real news 24/7. Thanks for watching.